Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cafecito con HACE as we kick off Pride Month. My name is Noel Rodriguez, and I'm a program manager here at the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement. If you are new to the HACE Familia, welcome. HACE is a national organization whose mission is to positively impact the workplace by providing impact and cultivating the community of talent. Our team does this through insight, access, and support. There are so many ways to get involved with ASE coming up. For instance, we have our Marketing, Communications, and Sales Inclusion series on June 12th, where you can meet and greet with recruiters from top employers. We have a Cultivating Comunidad collaboration with We All Grow called Jefas in Business y Vida on June 25th. And then lastly, for our ASE alumni, we have a way to leverage your strengths and lead with resiliency at our Alumni Insights Refresher coming up. Our team will be dropping all of those links in the chat. But to kick off today's Cafecito, we recognize that Pride Month was born from the courage of those who rose up at the Stonewall Inn in 1969, demanding dignity, safety, and the right to exist openly. Pride is a celebration, it's a beacon of hope, but mostly is a call to action to honor the past and work for a more inclusive future in life and in business. Our guest on Cafecito today is Matt Wagner. He's a VP of Client Services at Target 10. Target 10 is a leading marketing agency specializing in LGBTQ plus consumer strategy. Welcome, Matt. So great to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here and see you.
So let's start with the heart and fuel of Cafecito. How do you take your coffee? Are you an iced coffee drinker? I have my iced coffee here like me, black, or do you have a completely different go-to morning ritual?
Yeah, I was excited to see this question as the first one, but I do just want to make one quick comment because I think what your intro noted is really important. That Pride is a call to action, especially this year. And I think learning from our history is more important than ever before. And as a note on that, I just wanted to show you this t-shirt, which might be backwards, but it says "Read my lips" if you can't read that copy. And it's actually part of an ad from 1988 that ACT UP, the organization that tried its darndest to get HIV and AIDS legislation and treatments and all of that to progress at a much faster pace than it was happening at the time. And the point of this ad was visibility and the fact that being queer in public is as important as being queer in private, including kissing, which is not a big deal, whether you're gay or you're straight. And especially in 88, think about it, 40 years ago, it made that much more of a statement, even though today it makes a statement as well. So just wanted to bridge that a little bit. Yeah.
I love hearing that. Matt, I love for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. Can you paint us a picture of your journey, your cultural roots, and how you've built your professional path to where you are now?
Yeah. And I will quickly answer your question because I also have an iced coffee, which
Love it.
is, as you probably know, a queer male insight that I can
Yes.
bring back up a little bit later. That if you're not familiar, do a little Google. Gay guys love our iced coffee,
Absolutely.
year round. But yeah, so I'm from New York City. I'm a New York native. I was born in Brooklyn, working class parents, both teachers. I wound up going to Columbia University, didn't get too far. Majored in poli-sci actually, so not marketing, not communications, but certainly an adjacent sort of path. But I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with it. And so when I first graduated, I wound up at a guerrilla marketing agency that did a lot of like stunt marketing and PR sort of work. This was 2007. And I was there for about a year, very fun first college job, but not a place I planned to stay. And the career break really, and I should preface this by saying I've been with Target 10 for 18 years. So probably the longest held job any millennial in the universe has ever held on to. But there's a reason for that. And the way it all started is Matthew Manello, the founder and president of the agency, had started it in '02. And so it was about 5 years later, and there was a community newsletter run by a gentleman named Chip Stevenson, who's the events director for Out Magazine at the time. And this newsletter had job listings, resumes, apartment listings, parties, kind of you name it. It was just like motley, whatever was going on in the neighborhood, essentially. I provided him my resume. Matt Tuminello saw it. We had a few meetings, and a few months later, he hired me. I think I was the third or fourth employee ever of Target 10, and still with it to this day. So it really started with community, and sort of that community thread continues to this day.
I love that. That's massively important and a huge part of what we try to build here at ASE, as well as that community of both mentors and sponsors that are really going to fuel you, on your career journey. So looking back at your career, hearing all those years that you've been at Target 10, how has specifically championing LGBTQ plus communities shaped the direction of that journey? What doors have been open for you that maybe you might not have expected throughout those years?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think something that's really important to all of us at Target 10, and to me as someone who has worked there for so long, is that the professional is personal and the personal is professional. There's really no separation in that sense. I think that doesn't necessarily have to be the case with every job, but I think for this kind of work, it really helps, and it just also puts a different level of importance on the work. I think that I don't really see it as a job. I see it as a calling, and the joy that I get out of the work comes from building marketing that's not just effective, which is great on its own, but it's affirming, it's bridge building, it funds worthy causes, creators, cultural moments. And I think something in particular with this role, and I think can be the case with multicultural, perhaps more than other kinds of marketing jobs, is I got really incredible access to rather senior level folks, whether clients or nonprofit leaders, community leaders, like in my early 20s through today. But that really helped me understand how to, like, not speaking of actually our pre-call conversation, like how to navigate a room, how to code switch between different levels of people, how to talk the way different people talk at different levels of corporate and outside of corporate, and how to find that intersection in bridge building, because often people are talking in very different ways, so you need to be a bit of a translator to help those things meet. And that's enabled me to build like a really deep, like rich network, including Anna, who invited me here today, folks at AIM. I recently attended an incredible new conference I'd never heard of due to some networking I made with community members. So I think it's really just when you are authentic and just sort of earnest with how you engage and connect with folks, people remember you, and they'll invite you back, and vice versa.
Mm. That totally resonates with the work that we're doing here. We really are. Many of our leadership programs start from the um, sort of the jumping off point of bringing your whole self to the work that you do, and your workplace, and that's going to create huge ripple effects in your work, because whatever your culture may be, both your ethnic culture, lived culture, you come from a working class background, if you're queer, that is going to be your superpower and what's going to make you, stand out. So, Matt, I wanted to talk specifically about the work that Target 10 is doing. You all have been pioneering LGBTQ marketing for decades. When you think about the work that you do, and its own ripple effects, how does it embody what we call in our annual theme, Juntos We Rise? So it's this idea that by lifting one voice, it creates opportunities for many. I think you've spoken to some of your own intersectionalities. Myself, I'm, a queer Hispanic immigrant, first generation student. So, we have all these intersectionalities. How does, how are you all envisioning sort of the theme of Juntos We Rise?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with like a little bit of a flashback, because when I was a kid, figure like 16, maybe 16, 17, I came out when I was 16 for the first time to like some friends, and then kind of gradually on from there. But I wasn't out to my parents, and this is when Queer as Folk was on the air, for those who may remember it or have seen it, the American version, I should say. And I would watch this show like in secret. We didn't get Showtime, but I'd have a friend tape it for me on VHS. I'd get it. I'd like wait till 2 a.m. when my parents were sleeping and I'd watch it. And there was this character, Brian Kinney, on the show who was a gay advertising executive who lived in a fabulous lot. He was like the epitome of like a cool gay guy for the most
Right.
part at the time. He had his flaws, but externally, superficially, he seemed great. And that was very inspiring to me. Just his lifestyle, his influence. But my point is, it was that visible representation that enabled me to imagine myself in a role like that much more easily than otherwise, or projecting myself onto a straight version of that role. It creates the possibility like that you can kind of envision yourself in that way. And while I think 20 years later, 30 years later, we have a lot more of that, it's not nearly enough. And so I love being able to reflect that intersectionality in the work that we do. And a lot of that comes from bridging brands with artists or educators, performers, advocates, often across communities. And so, a great example of an intersectional moment like that that was really successful is we do a lot of work with Trojan Brand for queer male intimacy, sex, safe sex protection, etc. And we worked a couple of years ago with an incredible team. Their name is Deafies in Drag. I believe they'd also been based in Florida at the time. And they are a deaf Latinx drag duo that makes really funny comedy sketches, primarily in ASL. And we were like, let's make a Trojan. This is also like 2021. So pandemic was still,
Right.
very sort of in, people were sheltered and all of that sort of stuff. And so we had the time to get a little creative. And long story short, it was incredibly successful because it not only, when you get to that level of specificity and intersectionality, it really resonates with everyone, as opposed to being so vague and ambiguous that you kind of just lose all interest. It becomes bland at that point. So I think those are like not going after these off the shelf opportunities, which sometimes can be cool, but coming up with new ones, new ways to engage folks. One other really great example is for Care with Pride, which is an initiative we've been running for Kenvue, which makes brands like Neutrogena, Listerine, Aveeno, for many, many years, 15 years, in fact. 2023 brought a number of nonprofit leaders together who we had interacted with, supported over the years, we being the initiative. And a long story short, put them in a Jubilee Media content piece that was all about LGBTQ leadership through the lens of intersectional identity, challenges, opportunities they've faced, and they wound up winning a PR News Silver Award, which is super exciting, our first ever. But I think it really, and I'll happy to share a link to that in the chat, but it's a beautiful demonstration of that sort of creating something out of nothing in ways that benefit everyone, client, community, and Target 10 as well.
I love that. I love hearing that, connection across communities. That's so beautiful. And I definitely look forward to, checking out those collaborations. So let's talk a little bit about barriers. What's one significant barrier you all are working to break down for the LGBTQ community? We've heard the term, and definitely relevant during Pride Month, of rainbow washing. So like that inauthentic connection between brands and the queer community. Also looking ahead beyond barriers, what is something you're determined to tackle next?
Yeah. So first, I'll start actually with I think a really good historical example of a
Mm.
barrier that was broken, sort of led by Target 10 and the work that we did. This technically predates my joining the agency, but there have been many versions of this, smaller than perhaps this one. But I think this really illustrates the point, and that is that often it's behind the scenes where things are moving and shaking versus externally. And so I can't give specifics, but we have a client. Everyone knows it. It's a Fortune 50 company. It's about 2005. They had some presence at San Francisco Pride, among many others. And San Francisco Pride, being super progressive, as they still are, San Francisco, said, this is at a time when almost no corporate entities had any sort of real trans healthcare, trans inclusive healthcare. And San Francisco Pride said, starting this year, if your company doesn't offer these particular benefits to trans folks, you may not participate. Over and out. And this company did not. And so Target 10 went to the leaders and said, Are you open to doing this? We'll broker an arrangement to keep you in the parade if you can commit to making this change. And we went ahead and spoke to San Francisco Pride. They granted an exemption. We participated that year. The next year, this giant global company with hundreds of thousands of employees had trans inclusive healthcare. And that's just something that honestly probably only like 11 people know,
Right.
unfortunately, but like there's a lot of versions of that that are happening, and especially now with brands being ironically the more trusted than almost any other entities. I think it's super important to keep that power in mind, whether from an internal perspective or an external one. um, it may not create a headline, but it's like real impact behind the scenes in ways that now for 20 plus years have been in play. um, but in terms of like right now, I think, it's not a specific barrier, but I think it's this reclamation of progress that we feel like we're losing, losing some ground. As I think you were alluding to post George Floyd's murder, and or rather into the mid 2010s, kind of leading up to 2020, it felt like this renaissance, Obama, Rainbow White House, love is love, everything's great. Every brands were like falling over themselves to cater to us. And then we all know what happened. It sort of like had this spike in 2020, 21, things got weird. And now here we are to to give you a quick recap. I'm sure you've forgotten, but it's really, I think, about making sure we don't lose the progress we've made, but also not losing the lessons we're learning right now and recalibrating to not just be rinse and repeat of like 2017 and hope it works, but to find, I think, the opportunity that this moment provides us while working through the challenges.
Oh, that's such a key word, opportunity. I think here at ASE and the work we do, we use that word all the time. And you alluded to our incredible CMO Anna, and in conversation we use that word all the time because that's definitely what this moment is posing to us. A moment to sort of sit, reflect, take a look at what opportunities are available for the path forward, and sort of adjust accordingly. So I love that you all are doing that too. Um, so I wanted to highlight a question that we got in the chat from one of our colleagues. So, what drives and fuels your commitment to your work despite the challenges faced by the queer community?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think kind of what I mentioned at the top of how the personal is professional and vice versa is kind of the macro answer to that question. But you know, it's being in community, things like this, quite honestly, digitally, but certainly in person as well, that just remind me over and over. And it doesn't always have to be an LGBTQ plus event. It could be something like the ANA's Multicultural Marketing Conference, where certainly LGBTQ is part of it, but it's everyone. It's Black, it's APA, it's Hispanic, API rather, it's Hispanic, disabled, etc. Um, but it's also just knowing that we have to. Like, this isn't really an option. Whether I'm doing it or someone else, someone has to be doing this. And just to give a quick, maybe inspiring example, one of the organizations that I like to support that I've brought some clients to is Outright. And if you're not familiar, Outright International is a global nonprofit that primarily deals in the global East and South, where homosexuality is criminalized by death, or people are being jailed for being trans, like really heavy duty human rights violations. So their work is probably among the most important from a life and death perspective. And 30% of their funding has been cut due to the federal grant removals and all of that. And that's a huge portion of a nonprofit's budget that's meant to operate internationally. And so they had an event on Monday, which is their annual fundraiser, and it's called the Celebration of Courage, which I think is an apt name for this time. And without getting into the detail, it was a very inspiring moment, but something that someone said, they were doing kind of the personal fundraising appeal towards the end. And this gentleman who'd supported the organization for many years, straight guy, family, not sure how he landed it outright, but he's been involved. Um, he was talking about how in 2020, his younger son was asking, I think this is a very, very wealthy family, real estate. His son asked him, Dad, all of these people are suffering around the world. Are we hoarding our money? And
Mm,
that hit him like in the gut, and in the heart. And cutting to the chase, he donated $1 million on the spot to this organization in the room. And you can only imagine
mm,
what that was like. But it's moments like that which are so I hate that it's needed, but it was
Right.
such a moment of like affirmation of community and from an ally. Speaking of allyship, that's why I do this work.
Mm. That's so important, Matt. I get, I mentioned when you and I were pre-meeting that I get to work with our students, both college and high school students, and sort of what you just mentioned about the sort of next generation highlights another question we were asked in the chat of what's one piece of advice you share with your younger generations coming up in their careers. That story you just highlighted, obviously the younger generation is watching what folks are doing now, how we're reacting to this moment and being proactive in this moment. So in terms of your career, what advice would you give folks from younger generation?
Yeah. I honestly, I say network your asses off. Like that's maybe sounds cliche, but I think I have learned, listen, I'm 41. I've been doing this for 20 years. I think I
Mm,
have learned personally that the so much comes from your circle, whether it's colleagues, friends, someone in between, community. A lot of opportunities have opened up just by networking. Reach out to someone who interests you. Ask if they can do a 15-minute informational interview. Go to
mm,
networking events. I think, especially in this age where everything is so digital and virtual, it can anonymize us. It flattens us out in many ways. And even just from a simple job application process, you see jobs go up and then they're down an hour later because that person who put the job up is circulating it on LinkedIn, for example, to their network, or they're sharing it with their colleagues. Like that's just how it works, whether we like it or not. So I think leaning into that. And what's nice is if you're a member of a community that is marginalized, for better or for worse, whether it's queer, Hispanic, etc., take advantage of the fact that those communities are smaller and much more willing, in my experience, to help one another, like throwing the ladder down, whatever the analogy or metaphor you want to use. I have been helped so much by queer people throughout my career who never had to, but they wanted
mm,
to the same way I want to, because we don't want to leave generations behind us, just we don't want to leave them behind.
mm.
So I encourage, like, don't be shy about it. And it's also just a great way to get experience talking to people, which is also like a lost art form at this point. So I think it can benefit you in a number of ways.
Yeah, that is so incredible, Matt. As we wrap up, what's your hope for the future of allyship and representation, specifically in our professional spaces?
Yeah. So I think this honestly speaks to intersectionality as well. Something that we're looking to do with our clients and our work is, I think, kind of that 2010 to 2022 period that I referred to. It was a lot of really positive, optimistic, identity focused marketing, but we kind of lost the thread a little bit to not we kind of lost the marketing a little bit. Like, what is the brand's relevance to a queer person, a gay man, a lesbian woman, a trans person, through the lens of identity, not putting the identity first? That said, in that case, I think the intersectionality becomes that much more important, because the way you might talk to a queer Black man could be very different than a queer white man in ways that really resonate with them and have them to understand that you get them as consumers and human beings. So this idea of almost like transcultural engagement, we're multidimensional. You can be queer and Hispanic. I can be white, queer, and Jewish, rural, neurodivergent, disabled, corporate. Like, we all have these identities within us, and they're all core to our experience and true. So I think it's so easy to be like Black marketing, LGBTQ, Asian, and that's just not how the world works. That's not how life works. So the idea of breaking out of these buckets of identity and looking at people more multidimensionally, and that allyship becomes as much about curiosity and connection as visibility. Um, because I think when we embrace intersectionality as a standard and not the exception, that's when you really start to build best in class marketing that reflects the world as it is.
Love that. What an incredible line to end on, reflecting the world as it is. Thank you, Matt, so much for spending this time with us. I invite everyone to check out the links in the chat. You can connect with Matt on LinkedIn. I highly recommend taking a look at his post that has some incredible data around some of the intersectionality that we've been talking about. And Target 10 as well, and also checking out all of ASE's event. I wish you all an incredible Pride Month and celebration. Continue bringing your full self to work, also practicing that allyship. And yeah, we'll see you at the next Cafecito. Thanks so much. Have a good one,
Cheers.
everybody. Bye bye. Cheers.